Hey guys, just a quick heads up. Right at the beginning of this recording, the internet gremlins did something weird. So in the first 2 minutes, you're going to hear some sounds kind of disappear and cut out. And then at one point, for about 30 seconds, I sound like I'm screaming into a microphone. I've tried to get the audio down so it's at least listenable. But if you need to hit the jump ahead 30-second button a few times there to get over it, just know that it only goes on for about a minute or two. So hopefully you can sit back and enjoy this episode, even if you have to skip a little bit of the intro. You can forget a lot of things, Foster Care Nation, but never forget this. You're listening to Unparalleled Studio.
Signal.
Foster Care Nation, listen up. This is
Foster care and unparalleled journey.
strength for the powerless, courage for the fearful, hope and healing for wounded hearts. Hello, and welcome back to Foster Care, an unparalleled journey with Jason and no Amanda. So she's out doing all the stuff she does, guys. I know she's now become more like a guest on the show than a co-host because, well, life is just busy when you have two little ones. And so, you know, we have two of them under one, and, well, technically one of them's just over that, but close enough. She's still in diapers, and she is still a holy terror that's just adorable for holy terrors, but she requires a little bit of maintenance along the way. So today, I've got a former foster mom with me, and an adoptive mom, and a whole bunch of other qualifications, like somebody who knows a thing or two about the foster and adoption system. So today we've got Angie. Yeah, you better put your last name on there, and I wrote it down. It's Grandt, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep. AngieGrandt.
Good. I feel like, I'm like, I just typed that. I know what it is. I'm going to say it wrong here. I usually try to ask ahead of time, and then I forget to ask, and I was second guess myself because I'm good at mispronouncing names. All right, so I have AngieGrandt here today. How are you doing today, Angie?
I'm good. So glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you here. So, let's just start with the foster mom thing. What made you decide to become a foster parent?
Let's see, man, it was probably back in 2010, and I had just finished up getting my master's degree as a speech therapist. And I was married at the time. My husband and I had a biological daughter who was about 10, and I didn't really have a desire to necessarily like birth another child, but I knew that there were so many children out there who, needed somebody to love them and take care of them, whether, kind of short term or longer term. And so I don't know, there was just something that led me to reaching out and, finding out more about foster care and how I could help. I always wonder, I am no longer married, but I always wonder if my husband was really along for the ride or if I just convinced him or, what that was all about. But I don't know, I just felt this strong desire to just help kids who, needed some love at the time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, everybody has their own reason why they step into foster care. And, a lot of times it comes out of a childhood experience, or sometimes it's just an altruistic, need to help kids. And so that's awesome that you're doing it. Even though, you're not married any longer. So you're a single mom raising kids?
Yeah. So my daughter now is 21. And my son is 17. So now I'm in the process I'm in the middle of helping my daughter raise her own child. So no more child rearing for me, but, still in I don't know, that phase of life of helping others, I guess.
At some point, I had this crazy idea that they're going to turn 18 and leave the house and be self-sufficient. And I'm not going to be like the one actually parenting them so much anymore. And my role will be to step away more. And I'm going to say my kids didn't all follow that paradigm.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So you started off in the foster, becoming a foster parent. Um, let's see. We we talked about that a little bit, but I know it also said that you were a an adoptive mom and a speech therapist and an autism specialist, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a whole lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot. So first off, I'm going to say speech therapist. Um, we have a friend of ours. She was a charge nurse on the wing of the hospital when our daughter was there for a while. And she I got a hold of her when the little baby who's with us now came to our house and said, "Hey, this little," because she works in a NICU at a children's hospital. I said she's having a hard time eating. Like, well, you're the nurse on the floor, right? I know that the books tell you to do this or to do that, but the nurses on the floor, like they're every day in the middle of it. What do you see that helps? And her response was, she said, speech therapists are wizards. You need to get speech therapy involved. So she accused you of being a wizard in a good way.
Maybe. Too funny. I've not heard that one before.
Well, apparently speech therapy works a lot with newborns who don't eat well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, the last few years I've worked in birth to three, which I'm in Wisconsin, and that's an early intervention program. So from the moment a child is born up until their third birthday, they could qualify for birth to three services. So I don't work in the NICU. I've never had that experience. That would be fascinating, but sometimes we would get referrals for babies who had just left the NICU and need that feeding support. So yeah, it's been quite the learning curve for me in the past couple of years, just learning how to support families in that way.
yeah, if you want to come figure this one out, I'd be happy to let you, because she is, what is she, almost 4 months old? She's still not eating very well. She ended up with the G tube, and so we work with that, and it's been, we thought we'd seen almost everything,
Yeah,
and then we had this curveball thrown at us.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I found too, I mean, working in the birth to three program, that um, a larger percentage of children who had experienced time in the NICU were children who had also, experienced some type of trauma or, displacement from their biological parent. And, that some of those things go hand in hand. A child who's facing a change in placement more than likely has also experienced some tricky things while they were in utero. And so that has such a huge impact. So yeah, that was my experience, at least here where we live, is that more children in foster care that had also been in the NICU, those
Yeah,
same kind of experiences. Yeah.
yeah, a lot higher chances for some things to go on, and there's no doubt that there's a high probability that she did experience some things in utero. And so, from some of the stories that I've heard from the nurses about how her first month and a half was in the NICU. This girl's been through some stuff. So,
Yeah.
right now we're just doing what we can, and we're going to get her to where she'll eventually figure out how to eat and actually decide to eat. She's the first kid I've ever met who does not seem to have a real hunger response. And I'm
Yeah.
used to boys. Boys are
Yeah.
hungry. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter when you ask a question; they're just hungry all
Yeah.
the time. I had
Yeah.
I have a couple that are 20 in their 20s, and I have another teenage boy and two just preteens. And the question is, or the answer is always yes if you ask anything about hunger. They have it. So I'm going through a whole new learning curve, with a little girl who's decided that she's really just not hungry constantly like the rest of them are supposed to be. So
Yeah.
you guys deal a lot with that. We've also dealt with speech therapists with one of our other kids when he was younger. Just seeing he came out of a traumatic background, and he had problems with certain letters, which is interesting. And I'm going to tell you, I'm kind of a brain nerd. I look at the brain stuff. I'm like, this is so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
For him, K's and T's were the same. C's or K's and T's were all the same letter, which got
Yeah.
really interesting when we went to church. And he's telling everybody about our brand new kitty that we had in the house because he couldn't say K's. And I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. And we're constantly telling people, yeah, we have new kittens.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it took a little bit of work, but he found his way through it. So, what got you into this world of speech therapy? What made you decide that's something you wanted to chase?
So I started in the autism field right when I was in my undergrad program. I was going for psychology, and one of my classmates, kept saying, you have to work at this autism clinic. You have to do it. It's such a great experience. And, 20 plus years ago, autism wasn't really all that well known. And so at first I said, no, I think I want to get an easy psychology job. I don't know what I thought that was at 18 years old, but I wanted to get an easy job in a school or something. And but then I don't know, she kept bugging me. And then one day I saw an ad in a local paper where this dad had written this ad about his beautiful little 4-year-old girl and how she needs people to help her learn how to talk and she loves to paint. And he put her cute little face in there and I just couldn't say no. So I met her and then I just fell in love and, kept asking the clinic that I was hired for, I want more kids. I want to meet more families and learn about more kids. So I did that for about 8 years. And then I kind of reflected back and realized that I was the most challenged by and intrigued by the children who had interesting feeding things going on, which is super common in autism. And then also the kids who had really unique speech patterns, which is also really common in autism. And so I wanted to learn more. And so I went back to grad school 10 years after I had been out in the working field, became a speech therapist. And then before I even graduated, I ended up right back in autism because I never wanted to leave the autism field. I just, wanted to learn more or, specialize a little bit. So I still work primarily in autism. I also, like I said, a few years ago, started working in birth to 3 as a speech therapist. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of like my first love is autism, but then becoming a foster parent, and an adoptive parent, I have learned so much about trauma and attachment. And so now like putting all of that together is kind of where that's what lights me up, is just learning more and understanding more and, sharing what I'm learning with other people, just because you don't know what you don't know, right?
Oh, absolutely. So about 45 minutes ago, I was sitting here talking with Amanda and I said, I was reading through what you had sent me, what you do. And I said, what questions would you like to ask? And she goes, does she want to have a job as a nanny? So that's
how much do you pay? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, because some of the stuff is really interesting and could be really, really helpful. But I was really intrigued by the line that said, you found out that the missing piece that you had with your son was not more therapy. Because I talk to people all the time about, this, if you got this thing and this thing going on, you might need to seek out a little bit of therapy. You might need to talk to some professionals about this. And I'll always bang that drum to a certain extent, because quite frankly, if your kid was having another health issue somewhere, you would take them to a doctor. And so if they're having mental issues, sometimes you need to take them to a therapist. And that's just, lest anybody think that I'm trying to talk bad about somebody. I got a guy, right? Dr. Tom is a freaking genius. And I won't give his name or any more of his name than Dr. Tom out or his number because I want him to have time on his schedule still for me. But yeah, so therapy can be really, really useful, especially with kids. But, you mentioned that what you found was that he didn't need more therapy. What he found was that when you worked on your own mindset, that was the real game changer. So what do you mean by that?
So a little bit about my son. Like I said, when we were married, we had a couple of foster placements in our home. And, that was quite the learning curve for both of us and highlighted why maybe we wouldn't be married someday. That's all I'll say about that. But, I respect, him and, what matters to him. But in that process, then we ended up meeting our son, not through the foster care system. We ended up meeting our son because we were foster parents and my son's biological mom needed a home for him. She couldn't parent him anymore. And a friend of ours ended up contacting us saying, there's this mom, she can't find an adoptive family. Would you guys consider? And adoption really wasn't on the plan. The plan was to help a kid until their parents were ready to take them back and then help another kid, just do that. the plan wasn't to add to the family, but when we met him, we just fell in love with him and decided to invite him into our home. But he was 5 at the time, and at that point had experienced a substantial amount of trauma and neglect, and had really clear signs of attachment difficulties. And so what I knew about trauma and attachment was get him in therapy and get a specialist who specializes in trauma and attachment. Don't just send him to any old therapist. And so working where I work in a behavioral health clinic, in the autism work that I do, I had access to like the best resources, right? So I got my son in every therapy and, intensive day treatment programs. I got him a, medication management, like everything. I was doing everything that every resource was telling me, like, try this, try this, try this. So I was hyper focused on getting him everything that he needed, and was putting no focus on how to help myself keep my head in the game when things were really hard. Not only was he was already kind of naturally angry because I was the new mom in the situation, right? And his biological mom had left him and he couldn't take it out on her. And so kind of right away, we had a brief honeymoon period for those first couple of months. But then after that, I was just the brunt of it. And he was just really angry at me. And which, like his therapist would say, like, just tell him how much you love him. Make sure he knows you're never going to leave him. Make sure, it was very like intellectual, the things that he was telling me, like, just make sure he knows you love him. Just make sure. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing that. I'm doing that. But it wears on you over years and years and years of hearing, the same script over and over again. And then, so we bring this traumatized child into our home and we promise him a loving home. And then we get divorced, a year or so later, which then just resurfaced all of his trauma. And I knew it would, but I knew I had to do it for the sake of my kids. But that resurfaced everything. And then to have that disconnect, right? My husband and I were no longer even close to being on the same page. And it just exponentially made everything that much harder. And so I'm still taking him to therapy, but then, there was a disagreement about, whether or not our son needed that, but I'm just like doing all the things, right? But I wasn't doing anything to keep my head in the game. I was just like forcing myself, like, just keep letting him know you love him. Just keep letting you love him no matter what. Just keep letting him know you're never going to leave him. And yeah, after years and years of it, it just got really, really hard. And the like even knowing how to have a good divorce, I didn't know how to do that either. So to be quite honest, I don't have a great relationship with my son right now. I ended up getting involved in coaching about a year ago for myself, and have done so much work on myself that I'm in such a better place to start working on my relationship with him. But he's 17 right now, and he has chosen to live primarily with his dad. And so I don't see him a ton, or hardly at all, really. And so it's something that I want to work on in the future, if that's something that interests him. But so I know that mindset work has made a huge difference in my other relationships, in the way that I show up, at work, the way I show up, with my daughter who has a new baby, the way I show up in my relationship with the guy that's in my life, in ways that I didn't know how to do before. And so seeing that in myself and like seeing that shift that's happened, I quickly realized, as I was learning how to take control of my mindset, I quickly realized that, holy cow, that's what I needed 10 years ago, when I was promising my son, like, I love you, I'm here for you no matter what. But those were, like, when I look back, those were me just saying, like the therapist said I need to say, I'm here for you, I love you, I'm doing everything I can. But what I really needed was to actually believe in myself and to know how to do that. And I didn't. And so I know that my circumstance isn't unique. I know that lots of foster parents out there, adoptive parents, are raising children who are pushing, not pushing, I don't mean that in a bad way, but testing parents in a way that they don't know how to keep their head in the game. And so I'm really on a mission to help other parents do that. So that's kind of how I got into coaching. I'm not sure if that answers the question you asked me, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Is I'm doing work on me to show up as a different, a better version of me. And I want to help other parents do the same.
Yeah. So anybody who's listened to this podcast for very long has heard me or Amanda talk about her childhood. So Amanda came up in a house where drugs were kind of a thing. And by that, I mean, like, it was a product that moved through the house that she grew up in. She had lots and lots of traumatic experiences as a kid who grew up in a place that was not psychologically, physically, emotionally safe in any way, shape, or form. And so today she has lots and lots of trauma issues that come all the way back from her childhood. And she'll tell you that. The thing is that sometimes, we all have our traumas from our childhood, from our life somewhere, from having dealt with things as a parent or an adult that can be really difficult. And then you bring these kids into your house who have lots and lots of trauma, right? And so it all kind of gets dumped out on the floor, and it turned into this ginormous goulash of craziness. And then we all have to work together to get through this together. And so my question to you would really be, how do you begin to sort that out when you're working with kids who have lots of trauma, and you as an adult probably have your own level of trauma from the past?
Yeah. So I think, you had said earlier, children in particular who have experienced trauma, I agree with you. I feel so strongly that therapy is essential. They have experienced things in their life that, a trained therapist can really help them to work through those things and kind of package that up. But then in working with a mindset coach, really the primary focus of a mindset coach is to say, okay, so the past happened, and it may have been awful, something that many people couldn't even imagine living through, but the past is the past. And so mindset coaching says, okay, here's what we have today. Today, you have, a loving mom and dad, and how do you want the future to look? Because we don't have to let the past dictate our future, and to really learn how to embrace that and create your future, as opposed to constantly getting stuck in the hamster wheel of, okay, this is how I always respond to my kids, or this is how I always respond to certain situations. And so in thinking about working on your mindset, it really does start with the parents, because although, like in their late teen years, when children are at that higher cognitive level, they can start making decisions to work on those things. But really, my thought on all of this is, when parents are able to look at life from today is today, and let's create tomorrow in the future, in the next 10 years, and the rest of our life in a positive, loving, connected way. When parents learn how to show up that way and not be so reactive to what's happening in the moment, then they are showing up for their kids in a way that shows their children how to respond differently to challenging situations also, right? Like, our kids are always watching us. They're watching everything we do. And my personal experience with kids who have experienced trauma are watching even more closely than like my biological daughter. She's watching, but my son, who has experienced trauma, he was watching 100% of the time, every little detail. He knew everything. And so when we're able to really change our habitual ways of thinking and feeling and showing up, that's when then we are having a ripple effect on our kids. When we're showing up differently, we're showing them how to show up differently as well. So the impact on kids is less direct, but because it really starts with us as the parents, to show them that they don't have to be a victim to their circumstances. And even if the circumstances just, like, I don't know, maybe I got a crummy teacher at school, you don't have to be a victim to that, right? Like you can, take extra time to study to be even better. Or, like, I think we're all kind of habitually trained to be victim to, I don't have enough time, or got this crummy teacher, or I'm in a crummy marriage that I don't like, or my kids are behavioral, right? Like it's so easy to just feel victim to that as opposed to just taking charge and creating the future that you want.
I'm in a dad's group that I talk about quite a bit on here. And I don't know if I ever really mentioned the name of it. If anybody's interested, if you go look up the Dad's Edge, it's a podcast, and it's all about being a dad. And he's got a mastermind group that I'm a part of. I'm actually in the leadership. I've been in the group for many years now, and I've learned a couple things in there. And one of them is a guy who used to be in the group. He used to say all the time, "Don't worry, your kids really don't listen to you anyways, but you should worry because they're watching everything." And I see that in my own kids all the time, because what makes me the most crazy about my kids, the things that they do that bother me the most, are the things that remind me of me where I'm screwing up. And I'm like, no, you don't get to make this mistake. I've already made it. You've got to learn from my mistakes. And it makes me crazy when they make the same mistakes that I do. And I get so so upset by that. And I find those are the things that tend to trigger me off into my own little amygdala response over here. And I'm tempted to raise the voice and try and pull out the dad voice, because a dad voice is wildly useful when there's a kid running towards a street, when there's a big noise in the room and you need to get your kid's attention. It's really useful for those moments. But when you're trying to correct a behavior, when you're trying to solve an issue occurring in the moment, it almost always leads to their little ears actually turning off. It's like you can see the ear just turn off, and they don't hear you anymore. Like, yeah, I'm not listening to him. He's just going to holler and scream. I'm going to ignore that. And that's why my book that I have not written on paper, just in my head, is already titled. It's the title of it is "Nobody Hears You When You Yell," because that's the truth of when it comes to kids. The more you yell, the less they hear. So I think it's really, really useful to realize that when it comes to dealing with kids. And in order to handle that, you do have to have your own stuff processed and work through a bit. And I think that's something that they don't, in my experience, so I can't talk about the whole nation or every county's program, but I don't know that they put enough emphasis on that. And a lot of times when it comes to becoming a foster parent, you're going to see trauma, big trauma, kids who've seen drugs, been exposed to drugs, violence, all kinds of horrible stuff. And you need to kind of have your own stuff worked out a bit to be able to be effective in helping them regulate themselves when this stuff goes nuts. I've got a friend of mine who's currently, taking care of, it's a foster type placement, kinship. I'm not certain exactly how it works, but I know that's something that's a struggle for them, understanding, hey, when I look at my daughter and I raise my voice a little bit, like she snaps too and pays attention. She knows to pay attention. These girls, like they don't hear me when I get it. Like, it doesn't make sense. I know, but it does make sense. You just haven't had enough experience to know why that makes sense yet. And I think that's something that as foster parents, we really could use some help in realizing that their brains are fundamentally different.
Yeah. 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 And, like I remember when my son was younger, his therapist would, frequently remind me that his behaviors are a reflection of his trauma. And so intellectually, I knew that. As he was, screaming, yelling, swinging, throwing, whatever was, or some of the other things that I think a lot of people don't talk about, the peeing and food hoarding and, things like that aren't talked about as much. But, as all of those things are happening, like, in the frontal lobe, I'm like, this is just a reflection of his trauma. This is just a reflection of his trauma. But, again, like, as parents, we're human too. And it was hard to really believe that and to show up in a way that he, like, we all have energy, and I know now that I'm aware of that, like, you think about, I don't know, like, you have a disagreement with your spouse, right? And you can, like, feel that gross energy, like, down in your stomach, versus like when you get really good news and you can like feel that really light energy. And I now know, looking back, that even though my son was doing something that was pretty atrocious, right? And I would go in there and I'm like, I still love you, buddy. Like, I'm here for you. I'm not going anywhere. I would just like say that over and over again. And so I felt like in the moment, like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But I now look back and think like, I think in my gut though, I was like, oh my gosh, this is awful. Like, how could he do this? So I didn't really believe myself because I didn't know how, but I now know that that way that I was showing up really had an impact on him, because I think kids who have experienced trauma are so much more intuitive than we realize, or than many people realize. And so, I mean, he was probably just calling my bluff, right? Like, okay, I hear you, Mom, but I can tell that you are not loving me as much as maybe I want you to, you know?
Yeah, everybody understands that we're all physical beings, and as adults, we all like to think we're intellectual beings, and we forget that there's a spiritual and emotional, part of ourselves as well. That kids, especially kids of trauma, really read that well.
Mm-hmm.
I go back. I remember one particular little guy who stayed with us for like a year and a half. We became pretty close, and when we were in public, I mean, if you had littered or something, he seemed to be able to just pick up something on you that made him think, I don't think I like he was really in tune with who the people around him were. And I've come to learn that that's the hypervigilance of a kid of trauma who's always looking for danger, always looking for something. If you feel guilty about something, he knows it.
Yeah.
And I think he was almost 5 when they left our house, if I remember correctly. He did not yet have the language to be able to say that. He just knew what he felt. And as adults, sometimes it's really hard to read that and understand what you're seeing in a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember over the years, my son would often ask me, "Why are you mad, Mom?" And I felt like I was doing such a good job of faking it, right? Where I'd like, we're going to the grocery store and come on, we got things to do. And I thought like I'm doing the things a mom is supposed to do, but inside I might have still been holding on to a grudge about something that had happened earlier. And I didn't think that I was, but I mean, I can't even tell you how many times he'd say, "Mom, why are you mad?" And I'm like, "I'm not mad. Why do you think I'm mad?" And I would almost get irritated. Like, why does he keep asking me? Like, is he trying to like convince me to be mad? Like somehow like this child is trying to do something, but we all like get in our own head about things. But now that I, have learned what I've learned about the mindset, I think like, oh man, like he knew. And then he didn't trust my words, right? Because, he knew that something was going on with me. And I'm like, I'm not mad. So then he's like, okay, so she's feeling mad. I know she is, but she's lying to me right now about it. And so I think just those little things too, I think just over time just made our connection harder and harder and harder, because I didn't know how to work on myself.
Yeah. I remember one time, one of my little guys came into the office here, and we were talking about something. He just breaks into tears. I'm like, "What's wrong, buddy?" He's like, "You're angry." I said, "I'm not angry, man. What do you mean?" He says, "No, you're angry." I'm like, "I'm not angry. What do you mean?" And he looks at me and he puts his hands on his eyebrows and shoves them together and goes, "Your eyebrows go like this when you're angry, and they look like that now. So you're angry." And I'm like, "Oh, I forgot to turn my face on, bud. Sorry." Like, this is I don't have a terribly expressive face typically. So I have my like the world is normal face, and then I have my I'm thinking, I'm angry, look out, something that those are all really similar faces for me. And I'm not really expressive in that way, and it's something that really was difficult for him to comprehend, and I've had to really try to work on how to change that, because as far as he's concerned, he's reading basically two emotions. One is just kind of status quo, everything's okay, and the other one is things are not okay. And if I don't have my emotions turned on my face, then he thinks everything is going sideways. I'm like, man, this is so interesting. That's why I love the child psychology thing. In a different lifetime, I kind of wish I would have had the experience to go to school and take some of those classes and really understand that a bit deeper and more. I jokingly tell people I have a PhD in child psychology. It's entirely experiential degree. It's written in my PhD is written in crayon. I hang it on the wall over here. But yeah, it's an experiential PhD because these kids have taught me so much about what I thought I knew and how wrong I was.
Yeah. Oh, so true.
So yeah, that's really been a challenge. So I know we talked a little bit before we got going, and you said that you are working as a mindset coach now,
Yes.
and working with parents who are either foster or adoptive, a lot of that sort of stuff. What does that look like for you right now? What are you doing?
Yeah, so I in particular I work with parents who are raising emotionally intense children. So if you're a foster or adoptive parent, that's you, right? But it does also include parents who maybe don't maybe it is your biological child and you don't have an explanation for why maybe they have big meltdowns or whatever it might be. But I definitely felt a calling to help parents not struggle and not feel victim to their child's behaviors. Like I said, I didn't know about any of this when my son was younger and when I was actively involved in his life and raising him. And man, if I knew then, I would have just shown up so differently. And so I know that there are parents out there who are really hurting or are feeling just lost or victim, because I know throughout the years I definitely felt victim. We would cancel vacations or cancel dinner plans or just feel kind of stuck in our home because of my son's behaviors, or that's what I thought at the time. But I know that there's a different way to do it, and I know that mindset coaching can have such a drastic impact and a permanent impact on parents' lives. So I first and foremost, I have a group. It's called Connected Parents with Angie. And in that group, I do a weekly training on topics. It's a mix of topics, kind of what I see is coming up that particular week. And so, for example, like last week, the training was all about overwhelm because parents are feeling overwhelmed as the holidays are coming and the days are getting shorter and all of those things are really impacting our kids but also impacting us. And so the training is all about how to really like take control of overwhelm and to really understand that overwhelm is a story in your mind, which probably sounds pretty wild, but it's so true. So anyways, but I've done trainings on things like feeding issues or how trauma impacts language. So a whole slew of things that come from my expertise being a speech pathologist and working in an autism clinic for, almost half of my life. And all of the things that I've learned about trauma and attachment. So I do trainings in there, also some mindset stuff in there. But then I also have a coaching practice where I work with parents. So I do offer a free session. And I think that Jason's going to put in the show notes my Calendly link so that you can sign up for a free session. But in that free session, we go through this really powerful exercise to help you, see where you're at and see how to start making some changes so that you're not feeling so overwhelmed. You're not feeling like a victim and you can really start taking control of your life. And it really all starts with you. I know, like I said, in my experience, all of the experts were telling me my son needs more treatment. My son needs this specialty. My son needs that specialty. But none of what I was hearing, I had a couple of people say like, maybe you should see a therapist. And I tried it and that was not for me. Because not that I don't necessarily have things from my past to work through, but I would show up to the therapy sessions thinking like, I don't have things in the past to work through. I'm dealing with behaviors in my house every day. That's what I need help with. But that's not where the therapy was focusing. I really needed somebody to guide me to, okay, this is what's happening. How can you show up differently? How can you create the future that you want with your kids? How can you be more connected with your son? So I do work with parents one-on-one as a mindset coach, and it is life changing. And I'm loving it so, so much. So there's that. Oh, I'm also on Instagram too. Same thing as my Facebook group on Instagram. It's Connected Parents with Angie. So that's a place to find me too.
Well, that's great. Yeah, because I mean, quite frankly, that's one of the things that as we started into this whole process, almost 15 years ago. Yeah, I think
Wow.
we're at about the 15 years ago where we started into the foster system and started working with kids. I mean, I had no trauma. My wife had some, but she'd worked through it. And then all these kids show up with all these things, and it's funny, they find the buttons that you didn't even know were still there.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but like the buttons are being pushed. You're like, wait a second, why am I showing up this way? Why do I look like this loud, angry guy half the time? I don't like this. And it took a while. And, fortunately for me, along this journey, I also found myself involved with the dad's group that, a few years back. And that's where I have begun to tap into some resources. One of the guys in that particular group was, he was, I'm going to get it wrong, something like the lead psychologist for one of the highest level children's detention facilities in the state he lived in, something like that. So this guy's seen some stuff. He saw a kid literally punch his way through a wall, like a metal wall. And so he's dealt with some stuff, and he was able to offer me a few things, and talking to parents, and a lot of it really wasn't that they had a lot of knowledge and, oh, here's the magic solve, you just do this and everything's solved, but it was
Yeah.
understanding that I was bringing my own stuff into the situation, and I wasn't showing up as the best of me because I hadn't dealt with some of it, and I had to figure that out. And that was a
Yeah.
big challenge.
Yeah.
It's never fun when somebody tells you you're not, as awesome as you think you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I thought too, like working in the autism field for so many years, like I thought I could handle some of the most challenging behaviors without really skipping a beat. It's just what I do every day at work. This will be easy. And not that I expected it to be a walk in the park kind of easy, but I thought I am well equipped to handle this. But it is different when it's in your own home for sure. What you do at work doesn't always translate to home. But yeah, it was at a whole different level of challenging, I feel like, because yeah, you're right. It brings up your own past things that maybe you thought you had worked through. And I mean, I think a lot of people talk about that secondary trauma, right? Like you're in a situation every day where it can be really, really challenging in the moments every day. And then you wake up the next day and it's the same thing all over again.
Yeah, we had that situation with one particular kid, and man, that was a real challenge for a while. And quite frankly, it was the professional help that we ended up seeking out that allowed me to still show up even when it didn't fix the problem. And that was a lot of what I had to learn, was that I can do all the stuff right, and that doesn't mean I'm going to fix the problem. And as a guy, I'm a fixer. That's what we do. You have a problem, oh, I'll solve it. Look out! I'm here with a fix. I've got the duct tape and the hammer, and I don't care what your problem is. I'm going to solve it with my two tools over here. And it didn't work that way very well for me. It took me a while to understand how to work through that, and then to understand sometimes that, yeah, I can do my work, and it's still going to go sideways in my house from time to time, and I can't stop that. I just have to deal with it. And that was a
Yeah.
whole next level of figuring things out, is that sometimes you just have to deal with the problems because you are bringing kids into your home who sometimes have been through incredible traumatic things. Kids who've dealt with the death of parents, who've been in homes where they were exposed to drugs, kids who were born addicted to drugs, kids who've seen domestic violence, the whole nine yards. And all of that, pretty much can almost be entirely summed up in just my wife's life. And I go, oh, well, no wonder we still deal with things like we're not perfect quite yet. Almost, but not quite perfect yet. And it's a good thing she's not here. She'd be smacking me right now. But yeah, that's such a struggle. So I love that you're helping parents understand this stuff, because there was nobody there when we started this stuff to help us with that. There was nobody there to tell us that not only is this a thing, this is really normal. This just means you're human. You're
Yeah.
you're not Superman, and that's okay. And it took a while for me to understand that, but to have somebody to reach out to talk to deal with this stuff on a one-to-one basis sounds like it would have been something I would have loved to have had back in the day.
Me
So
too.
isn't that amazing how we oftentimes become the solution for the problems that we didn't have?
Yeah.
We become the solver of the issues that plagued our life. So I was so glad to have you talk about this here today, Angie, and I would love to be able to send some people your way who might be looking for something like this, because even if you're not a foster or adoptive parent, you still have some of these things in your life, right?
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that earlier, and that's one of those things we have to learn, and we have to be intentional about understanding, because I still have plenty of friends in my life who aren't involved at all in the foster or the the adoptive world, but are new parents, and they don't get it a lot of times. Turns out, I think I was the same way too when I first had kids. I thought I knew it all, and it wasn't until I had toddlers that I started to learn how much I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even, between the impact that social media has on parenting today, that's just wild. Just that comparison, parents comparing their children's, lives to other people's lives, what they think is real, but it's really just social media, or the impact that the pandemic has had on children's development too. I mean, there are just so many, I just working in birth to three, so many more interactions with parents where their kiddos are having sensory processing issues because they haven't left the house, right? They're 3 years old and they've never even been to Walmart. And I wasn't a fan of Walmart before, but there's something to be said for your child to like have that experience where, the lights and the sounds and the people and the smells and everything that happens there, right? All these babies are being raised without those experiences. And so then their parents finally take them out and they have a meltdown. Well, I understand why.
Yes, and so many of us did not understand why when it all first started happening. But nowadays I look at it, and I know that here where I live, I'm in kind of mid Missouri area, and even at the height of the pandemic, Missouri is a show me state. Most folks out here we're not very big believers in it. We're also not a highly populated area, so it didn't affect us as much here. But I know when you get into the higher population centers where they did need to take it a lot more serious, that was a big thing. That was big for a lot of families.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I just want to thank you again, Angie, for showing up here and sharing some part of your story. And like I said, we'll make certain that we have this stuff in the podcast link, the player links down below this, or over on our website at fostercarenation.com, to where people can find you. And I'll try and make certain that your calendar link gets in there. And I think we have your email. I'll put that in there, and a link to your Facebook and Instagram group. That way people can reach you if they're struggling with this stuff, and begin to a journey of healing on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I'm so grateful that you had me on. This was so great. And yeah, I hope that parents out there got a little bit of nugget of, something that they could change too.
Absolutely. Okay, Foster Care Nation, thank you for listening to Angie's story. Now take her knowledge and wisdom to heart so you can create love and healing in your family and community. Be sure to come back next week. We have new episodes every Tuesday. If you'd like to share your story as a guest, you can reach us at jason@fostercarenation.com. You can connect with other like-minded people on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/fostercareuj. And don't forget, we have a Patreon account where you can support our mission for as little as $5 a month. It's at patreon.com/fostercarenation. The links to everything on the show notes in your podcast player or at fostercarenation.com. And as always,
You are so super awesome. I think you guys so cool. Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thanks.
Unparalleled Studios.